Some people have been saying that Sam isn't talking. Certainly, it's easier to get along with a person that is more submissive. This is true. And certainly, it's more easy to get along with a pet that is more submissive. That is true, too. So, when you're looking for a pet, you don't want to get a pet like a dog that you're not going to look for something that's real high drive and aggressive. That's not going to work out. You want to look for a dog that has a lower drive, and maybe the parents aren't known as being aggressive. If you have one parent that was real aggressive to humans and the other wasn't, it's going to be a toss-up. You never know what you're going to get. With a dog, you can do a lot of training with the dog, so that can be a big difference. If you do a lot of training with the dog, you can make it so that it's compliant and that you have used dominance so that the dog knows that you are the dominant individual. Now with a bird, at times he knows that I'm the dominant individual, but at times he tries to dominate me. That's just how it is. I'm in his murder of crows, or whatever you want to call it. By the way, there's a lot of names for groups of animals. You don't have to write them underneath the video. I don't really care. Go ahead and write it. I don't really care, but it's just nonsense. There's several names for groups of birds, a band of blue jays, maybe a tribe of blue jays. I don't know. There's a bunch of different names for groups of crows. Ravens tend to be a little bit more solitary than crows, but you'll see them. They will be together too. The raven and the crow really are the same, but they're just sort of different. They have minor differences. The same is true of like a pigeon and a dove. Animals that have a social structure, there is dominance. There has to be dominance because somebody has to be in charge. And it doesn't matter if it's just like a male bird and a female bird, there's going to be dominance. My pigeons, before a pigeon will mate, they fight. The male and the female have a knockdown, drag-out fight, and the next day they're all lovey-dovey. That would be dominance. It's like a courting ritual for birds. It's very common in birds. If Sam was in the wild and somebody came in, like another animal came into his territory, he might escort the other bird out. If it's a crow, it might try and pick a fight with it. But generally speaking, ravens, they have a tendency to escort the intruder out. Now, I consider him more of a raven than a crow. And the reason for this is that he's a hybrid, but he's more similar to a raven in that, one, his vocalizations are more like a raven, not like a crow. His size, his beak is more like a raven's. It's thicker, it's bigger. He has a little hook on the end. He's much more of a raven than a crow. He is an African hybrid. He's a brown neck, raven, pied crow. I can cite lots of examples of birds being dominant. Geese can be extremely dominant, and if you keep them as pets, they can be totally dominant. This notion that the bird is nothing like a dog is correct. It's a different species, but all species that have a social structure have a tendency, there's like some kind of dominance involved. It doesn't even matter. You can look at human beings and what they do. It's very similar. People seem to be very confused about birds. I think that it's that they look just so totally different, but they don't really. Like I've said many times, all species on this planet are related. And if you think about birds, they're one of the few species that walks on two legs. They're bipedal. They're warm-blooded. Certainly, they're descendants of dinosaurs. They aren't descendants of mammalia, but they are, similar to us and share a lot of the same DNA that we have. And all these animals that have, a social structure, like social hierarchy, they all display dominance. Somebody has to be in charge. How do you think that the bird, ends up being in charge? They're a dominant bird. He's a dominant bird. If he was in a murder of crows, he might be the dominant crow. Or a raven. He's more of a raven than a crow. But if he was in like a group of ravens, which tend to be more solitary than a crow, he would still be more dominant. He's a male too, so he's going to be more dominant than the female. That's just how it is. When they're going to mate, he is going to dominate the female. Do you think that in life, most people look for a submissive partner? They don't. They don't. And in the bird world, you definitely don't want a male bird that's going to be submissive. Why would you want a mate that was submissive? You don't. You don't want a mate that's submissive. You want a mate that's going to protect the nest. So don't think that they're too much different than your dog or your cat. Well, cats are more solitary, but cats too can be dominant. I wish that I could say that it's only children that make these statements about birds and animals that are incorrect, but it's not. It's a lot of adults that make these statements. They think something for some reason, and I'm not quite sure. I think that there's, this thing about human beings where they want to, look at the animal in an anthropomorphic way, like it's like a human, but humans are dominant at times too. Some animals are more dominant than others. Some animals are more submissive than others. It just all depends. But to make a blanket statement of like, oh, birds are nothing like dogs. They don't, once they have somebody that works with them, that's what the person was saying. Like, once they have their bird friend, then they never dominate the bird again. It's such bullshit. It's bullshit. You don't know what you're talking about. Like, do a little bit of research. Yeah, they get along, they're a mate, but at times they're going to have to dominate the mate too. So don't think that a bird is too much different than you, and it's too much different than a dog. Any animal, like I said, that is social, there's probably going to be that type of stuff going on. Dominance, aggression. There has to be. Do you want some chaga? Do you want some chaga? No? Some people have been saying that Sam isn't talking, that I'm talking for him. And it's not true. Another example of people that really don't know what they're talking about stuff under videos. The comment was made that Sam's coat looks horrible, that Sam plucks his feathers. That's what the term the person used was coat. That's not a coat. You would refer to this as plumage. And Sam's plumage looks fantastic. And I don't know what they were talking about. He plucks his feathers. What are you talking about? The white on his chest? Those are feathers, dummy. They're feathers. He's not a plucker. Somebody said something about the scales on his feet, that I should put stuff on his feet because his scales look real big, because they don't have pigeons, they have chickens, and they wanted me to put Vaseline on his feet because he probably has mites. Are you out of your mind? Sam lives indoors with me. He does not have mites, and if he did, I would take care of him. Still hearing comments about that I look like Edgar Allan Poe, which is just absurd. I look nothing like the man. There's still That's So Raven. I mean, do people have like childlike minds or something? Like you hear it once, so you think that, oh, isn't that witty, and then you just keep saying it? Like, do you have an original? I mean, Sam the Raven has more of an original thought in his head than a lot of the people that watch videos of Sam the Raven. He's probably more creative than at least half of you all. What are you people talking about? You people seem like you're nuts. Seriously, there's a lot of crazy people on the internet, that's for sure. There are. I honestly think that Sam is probably smarter than a lot of you all that will see this video. I would rather hang out with Sam than most of you all that see this video. It's the truth. I prefer hanging around with Sam. He's awesome. He's awesome. He's awesome, but he's also a dominant bird. He is. He tries to dominate the cat, but the cat tries to dominate him at times. They're friends, but there's like this playful, play-fighting banter that exists. It's ridiculous to put everything in this nutshell of like, what your views are, what you think is probably wrong. I used to say this about dogs all the time. If you think something about a dog, you're probably wrong, and that is the case. And my proof of that is that we have 4 million dogs dying every year. 4 million dogs dying every year. because people are unrealistic and think that they know what they're talking about with their dogs. You don't. You don't. Most human beings are arrogant. They think that they know what they're talking about, and they don't. Before you open your mouth about something, why don't you do a little research? And be careful what research you're looking at. If you're on the internet, you might be seeing a bunch of bullshit. Sam is a very dominant bird. That's how he is at times. He can be very friendly. He likes me, but he also screws with me because he's a raven. That's what ravens do. Sammy, who's your daddy? Who's your daddy? You are. Sam can talk, and the reason why his voice sounds a little bit like mine is because he learned how to talk by hearing my voice. So I'm going to drink this glass of Chaga here, but before I do, I'm going to add... Oh, you want some? Sam likes Chaga. You want a little bit more Chaga, buddy? And but before I do, I'm going to ask Sam a question, and he can answer it while I'm drinking the Chaga. So there's no way that I could be throwing my voice or something. Sam, tell us what you like.
I like Chaga. I like it. It's real good. You're my daddy. Peter, I love you. I love you.
See?
Ah!
Told ya.
Ah!
And if you're going to say, well, his beak isn't open, that's not the way that birds do it. They're not talking like us. They're not moving their mouth. That voice was coming out of Sam. It's a fact.